Width matters, especially when it comes to the width of your football boots. Because if you get a pair of boots that are too narrow for your foot shape, they're gonna hurt your feet, give you blisters, and just not be fun to play in. So in this video, I'm gonna go over all of the boots from the major brands and talk about which ones are more snug and which ones are wider. And this is all based on my personal experience, and hopefully it helps you find the pair of boots that are best for you. And if you are interested in picking up any of the boots that we talk about or any of my personal recommendations, you can find them in the description below. So we're gonna go brand by brand, and to kick things off, let's start with Puma. So Puma is gonna have three key models in their lineup. They're gonna have the Ultra, the King, and the Future. Now, one thing that you should know about Puma is that they do happen to be one of the more narrow fitting brands on the market, and that's definitely the case with the Puma Ultra and the Puma King. So let's start off with the Puma King. This is going to be a full synthetic boot that used to be leather a few generations ago, and I will say it is a slim fitting football boot. So if you're someone that's going to expect a wider fitting leather football boot like Puma Kings from previous years, that's not what you're going to get with the current King model. It's still a pretty solid football boot. The synthetic upper is really soft, but just keep in mind, compared to some of its competitors, it's one of the slimmest boots here. Now, the Ultra is actually a pretty cool speed boot. It has one of the thinnest and lightest uppers in the entire market, but that being said, it's very snug fitting. It's gonna have that tight one-piece upper design, and it is gonna taper pretty dramatically towards the toe box. But if you are looking for a wider fitting boot from Puma, I would definitely recommend going with the Future. Now, the Puma Future model, especially the Ultimate and the Pro version, so that would be the premium tier and the first takedown, they're gonna have a really soft, stretchy mesh upper, and although the silhouette itself may seem relatively narrow looking at it from the outside, because the upper is so stretchy, it's gonna give you a really comfortable fit. So even if your feet expand beyond the width of the sole plate on the Puma Future, because that upper is so stretchy, you're gonna have enough space to accommodate your toes. So if you do like the design of Puma football boots, and I have to admit, they do come out with some of the coolest models every year, if you have wider fit, I would definitely recommend checking out the Futures. They're a great football boot, and if you're on the narrower side, you can check out the Ultra or the King. All right, next up, let's talk Nike. So I think over the years, Nike has gotten stereotyped as a company that makes really narrow fitting football boots, but I think that may be starting to change. Because with passing generations, Nike has made an attempt to make slightly better fitting toe boxes that can more align with most people's foot shapes. But all of that being said, a lot of their models are still going to be relatively snug, starting with the Vapor 15 and the Superfly 9. So these boots are going to essentially have the same fit, just one of them is going to be a low cut version and the other is going to be a high cut. Now, I have pretty wide feet myself, and I was still able to play in the Vapor 15s, but that being said, they do hug your midfoot really tightly, so if that's a sensation you'd like, they could be a great option. But if you like to have a little bit more room and space to breathe in the boot, the Vapors are probably not going to be for you. Next up, we got the Phantom GX. Now, the Phantom GX is going to be a bit wider than the Mercurial, but that being said, it does taper quite a decent amount towards the toe box. While I found the Phantoms relatively comfortable through the midfoot, I just thought that in that toe box area, they were a little bit too snug for me personally. But they're still a really innovative football boot nonetheless. I love what Nike have done with the new grip knit technology. It's easily one of the coolest uppers I've seen. Next up, we got the Tiempo Legend 10. Now, the Legend 10s don't stretch quite the same as previous Tiempo models just because they're not going to be made of leather. Instead, they're a full synthetic model, similar to how Puma makes their new King model out of a synthetic material. Nike has gone full synthetic with the Tiempos. But despite that transition from leather to synthetic, I still find that the Legend 10s are one of the widest fitting Nike football boots that you can get. And not just are the Legend 10s wider than both the Phantom and the Vapor 15, but I also just find them to be more comfortable in general. So if you're a big fan of the current Nike lineup, but you also really prioritize comfort, I would either go with the Tiempo Legend 10 or the next boot on our list, which is the Nike Premier 3. Now, as of today, the Nike Premier 3 is the only leather football boot that Nike still sells. And just as a warning, this is probably going to be the last year that you can get the Nike Premier 3 in a full leather upper, as it will likely transition to synthetic soon. But of all the boots in Nike's lineup, the Premier 3s easily have the widest fit. The kangaroo leather is just so soft, and regardless of your foot shape, even if you're on the narrow side, it's just gonna mold to the shape of your feet over time. Now, since Nikes tend to run small compared to other brands, you're still not gonna get a whole lot of space in this boot if you go true to size. For example, I normally wear a 10.5, and in a 10.5, the Premiers are coming all the way to the end with my toes, but that being said, they're still so comfortable on feet. So for Nikes, if you've got wider feet, I would check out the Premiers or the Tiempos, and if you've got more narrow feet, I would check out the Vapor 15s, the Superfly 9s, or the Phantom GX. Next up, Adidas. Now, Adidas is really interesting because one of their narrowest boots actually happens to be a leather model, which isn't really intuitive, but that would be the Copa Pure 2. Now, the Copa Pure 2 is a really great calf leather football boot that's going to hug your feet extremely tightly, and the reason why it fits so narrow through the midfoot and the toe box is because it's based on a torsion frame sole plate. Now, that torsion frame sole plate has essentially been repurposed from older speed boot lines that Adidas used to make. It's very lightweight, it's very aggressive, and it also happens to be pretty narrow. So if you like leather football boots, but you want something that's really close fitting and almost hugs your feet like a glove, the Copa Pure 2 is going to be the way to go. But if you want something roomier, I would check out other leather boots. Next up, we got the X Crazy Fast Point 1. This is a great football boot. It was actually one of my favorite speed boots of the last year. In my opinion, it's going to have a little bit more width compared to the Nike Vapor 15s, so for that reason, I personally prefer them. But if you like those Adidas speed boots and want even more space, you can check out the slightly more expensive X Crazy Fast Plus. Now, the X Crazy Fast Plus is going to be around $50 more expensive than the Crazy Fast Point 1, but it's going to have a pretty different design. For starters, it's going to be a lot thinner, lighter, and it's going to have a traditional lacing system instead of a one-piece upper. And what that means is that it's going to have that U-throat design where you can really pull apart the upper to make sure you have enough space throughout the midfoot. And generally, the fit of the Crazy Fast Plus is just going to be more accommodating and more flexible. Just keep in mind that these are the lightest and most minimal football boots on the market, so the upper is going to be literally razor thin. So, just don't get stepped on. Next up, we've got the Predator Elite. Now, I think although the Predator Elites are a little bit more snug than the previous generation Predator Accuracy, I think most players with wide feet are going to find that these boots work well for them. You're going to get a really open V-shaped lacing system here that's going to be really comfortable around your ankle and make the boots feel a little bit more relaxed around the midfoot. I do personally wish there was a little bit more room in the toe box when it came to these Predators, but other than that, I still found them pretty comfortable, and they're a decent option if you have wide feet. But the best options from Adidas for those of you that have wide feet are going to be the Copa Gloro and the Copa Mundial. Now, the Copa Gloro is one of my favorite boots that Adidas sells. It's going to be a full calf leather upper, and it's just such great value too. This boot comes in at just $100, but you can often find it on sale for less. And the shape of the boot is actually pretty different from most of the other Adidas models. You actually get a lot of volume in the toe box with the Copa Gloros, even more so than the Nike Premier 3s, and they're just really comfortable, accommodating football boots. Now, if you want a fit that's pretty similar to the Copa Gloro, but with slightly higher quality leather, you can go with the Copa Mundials. Now, these are another great pair of historical football boots that have been around for decades. And there's a reason they've been around for decades. They are that good. The quality of the kangaroo leather is amazing. It's so soft. The build quality is absolutely A1. And they're still made in Germany to this day. Only word of warning on these is that they do stretch an absolutely insane amount. So if you are gonna pick up a pair of the Copa Mundials, I would recommend going a full size down. Next up, let's talk about Mizuno. Now, Mizuno is generally known for having wider fitting football boots, and I would say on the whole, that does tend to be the case. If you pick up the classic Mizuno Morelia 2 that I have right here, you are going to get an extremely comfortable, accommodating fit that has a lot of adjustability through the midfoot and a lot of space throughout the toe box. I'm going to be doing a full review on this football boot in the coming days, but I can already tell that I love it. And of all of the boots in the Mizuno line, I definitely think these are going to be the widest. Then another great option that's going to be a little bit more snug in the midfoot, but still plenty wide enough in the toe box, is the Mizuno Morelia Neo 4 Beta Elite. Now, this boot is just generally going to be a little bit more aggressive compared to its more traditional Mizuno Morelia counterpart, but it's still very comfortable and has that kangaroo leather throughout the toe box, so you are going to have a bit of stretch there, a little bit of adjustability, but because through the midfoot you have this one piece upper, it's just going to fit a little bit more sock-like, a little bit more like a glove, and you have a slightly more aggressive sole plate as well. And then the narrowest boot that Mizuno stocks is going to be the Mizuno Alpha. Now the Alpha is a great speed boot that I had a lot of fun playing in, but I would warn you, if you pick up a pair of the Alphas, just don't expect them to be quite as wide in the toe box compared to other Mizuno models. And because they're made out of a full synthetic material and don't have any leather, you're not going to get that same stretch out of the upper. But nevertheless, still great boots. And finally, last but not least, let's talk about New Balance. Now, New Balance, flat out, they are the widest fitting football boots you can get on the market. And that's going to go for all three of their models, the 442, the Furon, and the Tequila. And it's also important to note that New Balance is the only company we've mentioned thus far that actually offers wide variations of their boots. So for example, the 442 that I have here, you can get in the standard variation or the wide variation that I went with. And in terms of pure overall comfort, the 442 can go toe to toe with any of the boots that I've tried on. It's got a great shape, great fit throughout the toe box, and the centralized lacing system means that even if you have narrower feet, you're still going to have all the adjustability that you need. Then when it comes to the Tequila V4 Pro, that's going to be a laceless football boot, and it also is going to have a lot more space throughout the midfoot and the toe box compared to other laceless boots from Adidas. In fact, as I mentioned in my review, I think the Tequila V4 is the best laceless boot that's currently on the market. And the same is going to be true for another one of my favorite boots, the Tequila V4 Pro Low Edition. With the Low Edition, you're just going to have the implementation of a lacing system that's going to give you a little bit more adjustability and lockdown, but you're still going to have a lot of space throughout the toe box. And then finally, we have New Balance's flagship boot, which is the Furon V7 Pro. Now the Furon V7 is one of the widest fitting football boots I've ever tried on. There was arguably too much volume when I went true to size with these in the toe box. They also tend to run pretty long, so I would potentially recommend people going about a half size down if you're getting the Furon V7s. But they've got a really aggressive sole plate, a lightweight upper, and they can compete with any other speed boots from Nike, Adidas, or Puma. And if you're someone who likes the idea of getting a really lightweight and aggressive boot, but some models just don't work for your foot shape because they just hug your toes too much and give you blisters, then the Furon V7s could be a great alternative. And with that, we have covered pretty much all of the major boots from the biggest brands. So hopefully if you're struggling to decide which boots will be best for you, this video has been helpful. And if you are currently rocking with a great pair of boots, let me know what you're wearing right now. Also, check out the Patreon link in the description to get some exclusive content and help support the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.